and welcome to the Lit Club. I hope the last vlog gave you some food for thought about your literature classrooms. As promised, in this vlog, we will talk about practical strategies that you can implement to ensure critical and creative thinking for your classrooms. For our first strategy, let's travel back in time and visit ancient Greece and meet Socrates. Now, Socrates was a philosopher who emphasized the idea of asking questions. He prized inquiry over information and discussion over debates. Now, in Socratic seminar, this is what the first strategy is called, you have a leader or a facilitator who generates open-ended questions about a topic or a text, and you have students engage in discussions. Now, what a Socratic seminar allows you to do is that it allows students to engage in a civil discussion, and it also allows students to sort of ask the right questions whose essence lies in discussion and not just in arriving at a right answer. But how do I conduct a Socratic seminar? Well, here are a few easy steps. So the first thing that you need to do is choose a text and consider an authentic text that may invite some inquiry, maybe a story with some kind of an ambiguous ending. Second, you prepare your students. Ensure that students have read the text, and it is usually a good practice to inform students beforehand as to when they will be expected to participate in this seminar. Third, prepare the questions. Generate as many open-ended questions as possible and aim for questions whose value lies in exploration and not just arriving at a right answer. And lastly, establish student expectations. Ensure that students understand that the aim of a Socratic seminar is to engage in discussions and not debates. It is not about persuasion and rebuttals, but it's rather exploratory in nature. Speaking of deep discussions, let's take a seat, quite literally, because our second strategy is called philosophical chairs, where shifting perspectives, it's not just encouraged, it's actually required. Now, what are philosophical chairs? Philosophical chairs is an activity wherein students take a stance on a blanket statement, and it's particularly effective for decoding texts which have some sort of a moral or an ethical dilemma. So for instance, you can look at a text like The Bet, which was written by Anton Chekhov. He's a Russian writer. And this short story actually discusses the ethical dilemma behind what is more cruel. Is it death penalty or life imprisonment? So, although philosophical chairs is set up like a debate, it's not really one, because the idea is that students are open to changing their minds. So here's how we conduct philosophical chairs. So first, you provide a statement to the students with at least two possible positions, either yes or no, agree or disagree. So one statement can be something like, life imprisonment is a more cruel punishment than death penalty. After this, students are given about 3 to 4 minutes to jot down their thoughts on the matter presented, and then they take sides. Ensure that students also have a rationale for their thoughts. Once this is done, you can ask the students to move to a specific side of the room depending on what position they've chosen, what stance they've taken. Then you have a moderator, which can be a teacher or a student, who calls upon other students to speak. The person called to speak gives a clear rationale for their belief systems, and the subsequent students must summarize what was said before, and then they can talk about their own belief systems. Now, usually the discussion lasts about 15 minutes, and to end the discussion, the facilitator, who can again be a teacher or a student, usually shares their opinions and observations. And lastly, students can be encouraged to write a reflection that channels their thinking. So Socratic seminars and philosophical chairs get students talking, and a lot. So much that sometimes you wonder whether you've created like a debate team. But real learning can also happen when students connect what they read to their own lives, to other texts, and to what's happening around them. And this is where the strategy of text to text, text to self, and text to world connection comes in. Let's break it down. So first, let's talk about text to self connections. Now, text to self connections allow students to relate the text to their own experiences, beliefs, and emotions. And you can ask students questions like, have you ever felt like this character? Do you think you've ever been in a similar situation? And you can also engage students in reflective journaling. The impact of text to self connections is that it makes literature more meaningful and emotionally engaging. Next, let's speak about text to text connections. Here we have students compare and contrast the current text, the text they're reading, with other books, movies, poetry, historical papers, etc. And it allows a child to develop literary analysis, intertextuality, and critical thinking. You can use techniques like Venn diagrams or tables to compare and contrast texts, and you must assign texts with similar themes. And for the last part, text to world connections, you can get students to connect the text to real world events, history, or social issues. So, for example, a text like Animal Farm can be connected to the Russian Revolution. Now, what text to world connections allow us to do is that they encourage critical thinking and awareness of global issues. They allow students to see literature's relevance beyond just the classroom, and at times it might also foster social emotional learning by linking literature to human struggles and achievements. So, for example, if we read something called Uncle Tom's Cabin, that will allow us to relate to the African American freedom struggle. Now that we've debated, questioned, and made connections, it's time to turn the heat up. It's time for Character Hot Seat, wherein fictional characters face the toughest questions. And no, they cannot plead the fifth. There's no escaping this. In hot seating, you have one student who takes up the role of an interesting character, for example, maybe Macbeth or Hamlet, and the rest of the class asks difficult questions to this character to understand the motivations, the feelings, and their actions. Here's how it's done. So, first things first, you'd find one student who will sit in the hot seat as a specific character. Second, the rest of the class will ask them probing questions about their choices, thoughts, motivations, etc. The student in the hot seat has to answer in character, and they must use textual evidence to support their responses. Lastly, the discussion can continue until the themes, motivations, etc. are discussed. Well, so these were a few strategies that I thought of sharing with you today. If you have any other strategies that have been successful in your classrooms, please do share them in the comments below. And if any of you tried some of the strategies mentioned here today, please again do share them and let me know how it went. Thank you so much for joining me on the Lit Club today. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.